Hello and welcome, welcome everyone to our Queer Bodies panel. It's just really wonderful to be able to do this in person. We're one of the few places in the world that gets to do this, and the fact that we haven't had to have a break. The Same Festival was able to put on something last year. We put something mid-COVID online, and we can come back together in person is just really amazing, and really, really, really appreciate your support and coming out. I'm really excited for this panel, and I'm going to hand over to my lovely friend George, who is going to be the chair. And if you could give George and the lovely creatives a wonderful round of applause, that would be excellent. Thank you so much.
The queer writer, poet, and self-termed preservationist, J.H. Fridas, imagines a politics that extends from the body instead of the reverse. And in discussing J.H. Fridas's work, Jacob Boulder rather boldly imagines of this politics that the queer body, which supports and is supported by other queer bodies, stands as an antagonistic force against empire. But queer bodies don't exist in isolation. They exist in matter and in space and in relation to other bodies. And so in musing further, Boulder asks, can the spaces that the queer body occupies become queered? An architecture against architecture, blooming in the centre of the city. Rooms which, with open hands, pin gravity to the wall and allow our bodies to be pulled sideways or upwards rather than down, feeling our reorientated weight as the outlines of our bodies opening. Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm hugely honoured to be asked to chair this panel and to get to support opening up a space that provides space to hear from the really incredible humans that we have here. My name is George Parker. Did I just say that? No, that's my name. And I'm really committed to you hearing the very least of me for the next hour. As we go on a journey to think about queer bodies, and in particular, how queer bodies influence, are represented by, and shape and inform queer writing. So what I'm going to do first is introduce our panel, and then I'll come back and explain a little bit of the session, and then I will be handing over to fulfil that commitment to not hearing too much of me. And excuse my kind of clumsy grappling with my phone, but I really wanted to read you these bios because they're just super spectacular. So starting with the great human next to me, Jessie, who is a research psychologist and director of the Centre of Science Communication at the University of Otago, an award-winning science writer specialising in human behaviour. He has enjoyed international success with his books, including The Belief Instinct, Why is the Penis Shaped Like That?, Suicidal and Perv, a taboo-breaking work that received widespread critical acclaim and was named as a New York Times editor's choice. All of his books have been translated into many different languages. As a practicing science communicator, Jessie has written extensively for Scientific American, Playboy, the New York Times, and others, and his work has also been featured in numerous documentaries, TV shows, and radio programs. Would you please welcome Jessie? The also very wonderful Etta is sitting next to me, to my left. Etta is a writer and disability rights activist. Etta has had poems appear in Starling, Mimicry and Scum magazines, and plays staged in New Zealand, Australia and the UK. Etta lives with two other advocates and one sympathetic cat. That's a lot of creatives for one cat, I suspect, Etta. Etta is currently writing a first book of prose about life as a disabled person London with the assistance of Creative New Zealand funding. And could you please welcome Etta?
And I should also add, since that bio was written, also with the assistance of the Copyright Licensing Trust.
Wonderful. Thanks, Etta. Jackson, of the extraordinary jumpsuit, is a genderqueer writer, publisher and bookseller. They are the author of the Ockham long list, I Am a Human Being, as well as 2 collaborative chat books with Carolyn DiCarlo. They are a co-founder of Food Court, a reading zine series and independent bookshop in Wellington. Could you please welcome Jackson? And then we have the extraordinary Elyssia, and I am an out fan person of Alyssa's, who is an interdisciplinary artist, activist, and member of FAFSWAG. She is of mixed Niuean and European heritage. Elyssia is a producer for the FAFSWAG Arts Collective, having produced live performances, community events, art panels, and activations over the past 5 years. She has featured in works for the Auckland Fringe Festival and Auckland Pride. Her arts community practice is collaborative and intersectional, and she has been an active member of the collective action group Oceana International. In 2019, Elyssia was a judge for the Best of the Auckland Fringe and selected for the Basement Theatre Development Program, the Visions Project. She was the producer in residence at the Basement Theatre for 2020, and with other members of FAFSWAG, a recipient of the Arts Laureate last year. So could you please welcome Elyssia? And our final panel member will join us at some point when they have beaten the traffic and the car parking, and that is the awesome Ria, who creates work where fat, brown and queer where fat, brown, queer wahine are actively recentering, reimagining and re-indigenising representations of themselves and their bodies. Her celebrated collaboration, Reclamation, and I hope some of you saw that extraordinary production, life-changing, was the second project in the Basement's inaugural New Vision program. For her, she saw it as an opportunity to stand in my power as a fat woman of colour. It's a chance to celebrate the joyous, pleasurable, beautiful stories of Indigenous women. So, in absentia, could you please welcome Ria? So the plan for the rest of the session is, I'm sure you all agree, a pretty extraordinary collection of people to guide us on this journey around queer bodies. What we're going to do is hand over to each of our wonderful writers and creatives here for approximately 5 minutes each to represent their take on this topic through their own vision and words and works. At the end of that, we'll then be opening up a discussion, and the idea for the rest of the session is to be as interactive as we can together as we kind of explore this topic, although I have a few questions to get us kick-started as provocations. But again, wonderful to have you all here, and anyone on my panel want to volunteer to go first? I'm really happy to do that. But Etta, you're closest to me.
Okay, sure. Okay. First, I just want to quickly acknowledge. Thank you, Sam. No, that's fine. So I guess when thinking about queer embodiment, I've been thinking about the fact that a lot of the queer construction of families is about building something either after like the severing or disconnection of biological family, so building social family. And I wanted to acknowledge two elements of that that are different for me than they might be for other queer people and other queer people presenting here, but also other queer people in the room. One is that my great-grandmother's brother, Dr. Arthur Kronfeld, was the psychiatrist at the Institute of Sexual Sciences in the 20s in Berlin. So he was focused in his work on arguing that queerness was inherently biological and therefore there was nothing inherently problematic about it. So arguing through that for homosexual law reform in Germany, but a lot of that research and knowledge was destroyed with the rise of Nazism. And then also, I guess, I have the privilege, which shouldn't be a privilege, of having been completely accepted by my family with regards to explorations of both sexuality and gender, and I do feel the privilege of that, but also some anger that it even has to feel a privilege when it should be an expected norm. And so what I'm going to read today is an excerpt from my book about myself and my sister and my attempt to convince her that we were like the Top Twins. Maybe go gay, which is what my first crush said to me as I tried to come out to her via email. I would like to add that I think you stress a little too much about being well-spoken. An early crush emailing me circa 2010. In our childhood daylight, the tops in their waistcoats and cowgirl hats and brandishing guitars grinned out at us from a poster stuck to our closet door in loud affirmation of our twinness. We barely noticed this. On the floor in front of us, our latest game had taken a soap opera come magic realism turn for the worst. For the umpteenth time, Ken and Becky are at the altar declaring their undying love. Twin Barbies stand by in their bridesmaid finery, playing natural stick and fiddle to their significantly cooler red-headed wheelchair user mate. This is just the self-evident way of the world to us. Let's just say, and then, yeah, exactly. But wait, who's there? It is, of course, the poltergeist, Bad Benjamin. He is wreaking his usual havoc, upending tables and making guests faint. Their one and only hope is Good Benjamin, who will appear just in time to outwit and apprehend his twin brother. Oh, of course they were twins, says Sally later as she recollects the scene. We are not yet abolitionists, and it is a few years before I learn about the United Nations Convention Against Torture. So we detain him in a jug of water, marking his place with an upright teaspoon, and prepare him for isolation in the freezer. Feeling mean towards our imagined villain, we also tease our little sister Elsie for being unable to see the invisible rascal. She cries about being excluded from the twin world we are building. I just like people, I'm not a lesbian. Sure. And it's not like the Top Twins. I try and keep cool when Sally gets her first girlfriend. I fail, utterly and spectacularly, as is my preserve, being the already out, flag-waving, pride-attending lesbo. Besides, I've always been the loud twin, everybody knows that. Strangers and new friends think I'm therefore the older one, and I gently disillusion them with the same well-worn self-deprecating line, nah, just 2 minutes younger, I was just the chattier, chubbier baby, eh? It stays within 4 walls, but it does bubble over into singing it, practically crowing it, to one flatmate and maybe the other. Suki and Zoe are both deep-thinking fellow queers who celebrate quietly with me, as does our cat. What curious singletons always want to know is if we like being twins. This strikes me as an odd question to ask about a reality we have always lived with. At midnight on our birthday, I post to her Facebook wall, Sal, have we really known each other for 26 years? But what I mean is 26 years and 30 weeks, X days, X seconds, X milliseconds, X breaths. In utero, if the egg had split any later, we would have been conjoined. We have nothing to compare it to, it just is. The other question people ask is if the ESP is real. Sometimes I say yes, just to see their faces. But the closest I've ever come to explaining it is that it's like being in a long-term marriage. You come to know somebody's movements, expressions, thoughts and moods, and humour just that well. This is a less surreal explanation for why, when somebody surveys our friend group about what the best form of communication is, Sally and I chime, "Carrier pigeons, obviously," without even a pause or a look. Unlike the games that came so easily to our mutual imagination, though, as adults we have to work for our common ground. The only fantasy worlds we have both stayed substantially invested in are the fictional Oxfords in Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials trilogy and the subsequent books expanding on that unreality. At the end of the book, and here's a spoiler, lovers Lyra and Will are forced to separate after vainly trying to salvage a way to stay together. Curled in bed, I cried as Dad read the final chapters aloud to Sally, Elsie and I. The pair refused to see the other one live a half-life despite wanting to grow old and die together. There is a particular everyday closeness to being a twin, or being her twin anyway. For me, this is mirrored by an otherworldly loneliness if I ever let myself consider life without her. So, naturally, having only ever been in love once then, and never having considered children, I did not project a lover or a child onto this story, but my sister Sally. I wept with Lyra and Will, and my tears were for twin love. Thank you.
I was busy swooning and forgot to pick up my microphone. Here we go. Beautiful. Thank you, Etta. And we'll be coming back to engage with our writers and creatives about their work in a little bit. But thank you again. And just a pause to welcome you, Ria. We've already clapped you in. And we had the great pleasure of reading your bio so everyone knows how spectacular you are.
Thank you.
So welcome. Thank you for joining us. Jesse, should we be ultra-conventional as a way of queering our queerness and go in a straight line down this panel?
Okay. I was trying to get a handle on these constructs of queer and embodiment, which are actually quite, I understand them colloquially in terms of the language that we use in common popular discourse. As a scientist, they're a little elusive to me. I like my operational definitions, I guess. So if I had a student, for instance, who said that she was looking at queer embodiment, I would probably encourage her or him or they to clarify exactly what they mean by those constructs. Because they're useful, but do they map onto scientific literature and sexology studies, I suppose, in particular. And let me preface this by saying that I guess I come from a slightly different background. I'm gay to begin with, so maybe I do share some things in common with you. But I grew up in the U.S. in the 1980s. Sort of, I was born in 1975, so when I was going through the changes, I suppose, one of the things that was dominating media attention and popular conversation at that point was the AIDS epidemic. And I found myself becoming probably precociously aware of my own sexuality at a fairly young age. I don't know, maybe 8 or 9, I began to sort of recognize the fact that I was attracted to other boys and not to girls. But I very actively suppressed those feelings because I remember at that same time there were news reports about gay people being persecuted, vilified, demonized, as being abhorrent, as sinful, as incurring God's wrath. Ryan White was sort of a big a pioneering figure at that time who was a child who was dying of AIDS because he had contracted HIV through a blood transfusion. But I remember all the sort of vitriolic comments that he was receiving at that time, and I identified with him, I think, and I really just sort of pushed those feelings deep deep underground in terms of my own willingness, I guess, to acknowledge that consciously. And it wasn't until later on that I really sort of came to grips with it. And I didn't come out of the closet until I was, I don't know, well, I do know, actually, because I remember I telling my mother when I was about 21, and I told her that I was gay, and she thought I was joking. And because in her mind, she hadn't had a lot of interactions with gay people, and she immediately assumed that I was a drag queen or something along those lines, what she sort of identified. Because, I really had no people some positive role models, I guess, in my life to identify with as a gay man growing up. And I think I very actively, what's the term? There's a psychoanalytic term for this, but I basically put all of my intellectual effort and energy into my academic career, and I became deeply invested in that. I became a psychologist, got my PhD in developmental psychology. My area of research is in religion and psychology, and I think one of the reasons I was attracted to religion is because of all those sort of moralistic constructs that I had been exposed to, negative moralistic constructs that I'd been exposed to early on in my life, and trying to reveal the hypocrisies and sort of the transparent erroneousness of religious beliefs and thinking. So I had a very bad taste in my mouth, I think, because of those experiences. And then around, I don't know, maybe when I was 30 or so, I began writing a column for Scientific American, and they kind of gave me carte blanche to investigate any topic that I was interested in, anything about human psychology, behavior. I tended to approach things from an evolutionary perspective, and I noticed that when I wrote about sex, I got a lot of comments. And it was one way for me to be, I guess, to gain, I hate this word, but the sense of catharsis, to sort of really sort of dig my heels in deeply to these troubling issues and investigate them from a scientific, psychological perspective and tease them apart. And that was, I guess, liberating, I suppose, because it was the first time that I was able to really sort of, I'd come out of the closet by then. I had a partner. I was actually married, still married to the same person, 15 years later, so that's good, I suppose. But it was the first time that I could really sort of identify comfortably as a gay man, as a scientist, as a psychologist, to explore all the sort of the roots of the bigotry and the intolerance that I had experienced growing up. So that was a good experience for me, and I wrote a couple of books. One was called "Why Is the Penis Shaped Like That?" And that was interesting, actually, in thinking about embodiment, because the argument from an evolutionary perspective is that the penis has a particular morphology that it does in terms of the shape, because it has been designed by natural selection to retract the semen or the sperm of male competitors who had sex with the same woman prior to you. And there are all sorts of sort of interesting hypotheses connected to that. Yeah. And there have been actually empirical studies that have been sort of designed to test that hypothesis, and it's panned out. Why do you get tired after you copulate, after you ejaculate as a man? You fall asleep typically. You don't want to continue having sex. Well, if you were to continue intercourse, you would basically be disadvantaging your own reproductive success, because you'd be pulling out your own semen. But those types of questions, I liked making people uncomfortable. I mean, I guess that's the bottom line. But there was also this sort of empirical veracity to these types of questions, and from a gay man's perspective, writing about the design of the the design of the penis and what it was meant to do. It gave me this sort of outside, objective perspective, I think, in sort of analyzing these questions, and I really like that. My penis doesn't do that. I mean, it doesn't sort of serve that particular function, but that's one of the things one of the messages I've tried to get across in my books and my writing on sex, is that what is natural has absolutely no bearing whatsoever on what is good or what is moral. So there's a complete orthogonal disconnect between what is statistically normal and what is right and what is wrong. Those things are completely separate domains. And that's, I guess, the main message that I've been trying to convey over the years. Sex is just one thing that I write about. It has been sort of, I guess, a feature of my psychology, sort of approaching questions, just because of my own experiences. Yeah, that's me in a nutshell, I suppose.
Thank you so much, Jessie, and so many provocations for us to come back to in our discussion, which we'll make sure we leave time for. Awesome. I'm going to hand over to you, Jackson. Thank you. Is that right? Excuse us.
Yeah, good. Kia ora. Thanks for having me. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my book and then read some poems from it. I wrote this collection of poems over the course of many years, and when I first started work on it, this was before I kind of came to terms with my gender and really knew much about non-binary gender and things like that. But it was only once I kind of had that realization that the book started to make any sense. It's called I Am a Human Being, and every poem in the book starts with the phrase I am a, and then is from the perspective of a different thing. And I guess in a way, I'm embodying those things in the poems, or perhaps I'm showing how they are a part of something within my own body as well. So I'm just going to read a few, and hopefully you like them. I'm an egg. There is something growing inside me. It is a tree. Its branches and roots push up against the inside of my shell like bone shards. The tree is not the only thing inside of me. There are jars and fish and clocks and skyscrapers. There are robots and bears and riddles and things I can't define. It is too much for me to hold inside. I am cracking from the pressure. Soon I will shatter and everything will scatter like ashes. Soon I will be a broken thing. I am a tree. My bark is worse than my bite. I am a bottomless pit. Hold on just a second. What's that? What? You gotta be kidding me. Just get it done, Sam. Jeez. Okay, well apparently I'm not quite bottomless just yet. Sam's informed me that there's been a delay in construction. They're only halfway through. Didn't factor in the heat at the core of the earth or something. So as of right now, I'm just the deepest hole in the world. I'm sorry. I thought I was dealing with professionals. Honestly, it's not even that hard. You just have to dig a hole from one side of the planet to the other, and then bang, there you go, one bottomless pit. But with all these delays, it's costing me a fortune to have myself made. Now, I know these things always take longer than you expect and come in way over budget, but this is meant to be my grand opening. All these people have come all this way to see a bottomless pit, and you're only halfway through? There's something wrong there, right? I'm not crazy, am I? They should have at least given me some notice so I could hire some more diggers or postpone the event. But no, instead they tell me now, right when we're about to begin. And what really gets me is that there's absolutely nothing I can do about it. I mean, I don't even exist yet, not properly. I'm just a deeper than average hole. If I was finished, then I could do something. Look, let me show you the plans. See that perfect circle, how everything is meticulously measured? Isn't it beautiful? That's me there in those drawings. All the calculations are correct, I promise. But when humans get involved, everything turns to shit. That's why I decided not to be a human. I wanted to be something pure, absolute, a bottomless pit. There's no questions there. You either are one or you're not. No uncertainty, no silly middle ground. That's what I thought, at least. Oh well. We might as well start the tour. It won't be the same. It was meant to be a grand tour, but hey, maybe if we go really slowly, they'll be finished by the time we reach the bottom. I'm a skyscraper. I have so many flaws. I am a river. It seems like a metaphor, but it's not. I am a river. I'm a jar. I have a lid. I'm useful. You can put things in me, like pumpkin marmalade or a chocolate coin collection. I will hold them like a note until you need them, like a doctor's note, and then I will give them back like a suspicious PE teacher. I can hold lots of things, as long as they are very small, like a herd of tiny elephants or a graveyard of microscopic pyramids. I can hold big things too, as long as they fit inside me, like top secret government secrets or a super buff genie. I can hold things for a very long time. Once I held a ghost for 100 years. I never let go. I never fell off the shelf. I never shattered into a million pieces, most of which were swept up and thrown away, but some of which got stuck in the grouting between the tiles and are still there now, staring up at the perfectly intact skylight. Thanks.
Kia ora, Jackson. I feel like I might have just scored myself a favourite new poet, but I want to hear more, but we will hear more from you shortly. Elyssia and Ria, are you a double duo, or have you each got your own?
So,
I'll hand over.
Fun fact, we were going to prepare something, but we've been up to the eyeballs in Fat Feb, so we were just going to talk, I think.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, whakalofalahi atu, my name is Alicia Wilson-Heti. Thank you. It's quite nice to start my Saturday morning with all these lovely people. Also, new fave poet, can confirm.
Same doll.
So I was mulling, George, over queer embodiment, and I was sitting with my 5-year-old this morning, kind of just dazing in bed thinking about that. And the thing that I kind of landed on, I think, is like a fluidity. And I've been really fortunate and lucky in my life to always be allowed to be really fluid with whatever that looks like. I think that's the thing I landed on the most when I was mulling over that this morning, was it feels like more of an energy than anything, a really fluid, yum energy. And then just thinking about the work that I've been creating and the body of work that you saw, Reclamation, that kind of was birthed out of a fringe show that I did with a group of women called the Plastic Orgasm, which was a lot of fun, a little bit gross in parts because we had a fight with mayo. That's always fun. Can confirm mayo kind of is gross and has a whiff after a while. And I wasn't quite ready to park this investigation of female pleasure and desire, and I wanted to know, well, what does it look like when you are having that conversation with a group of brown women? And that's how Reclamation was born. And it was so much fun. It was just so much fun.
Who saw the show? Anyone here?
Oh yay, there was people that saw it. It wasn't just my family.
Is it going to come back?
I think so, yeah. So there was that, and then I was like, well, what does it look like when you get a bunch of fat women together and you have conversations around fatness and queerness and what it means to be Indigenous and living in those intersex all together. And then that's kind of how Fat Feb was first born last year. And it was really fun, and we had a fat girl pool party, and it was cute. Me and George sat in a spa pool together. It was really fun. I was also like that because we also had Sonia Renee Taylor in the spa pool with us, and I was like, act cool, act cool.
And I think it was the most overwhelming spa of my life. It was so much fabulous in a tiny hot tub.
It was a lot of fun, and so yeah, and then now we're here having this conversation around what it means to embody queerness, which being a part of FAFSWAG has been awesome because I'm constantly surrounded by that. So I think that's a real privilege, and I guess we don't talk enough about the isolation of what it means to be a queer person and how it is really, really important to find your soft places to rest in. And that's what I think we've managed to create with FAFSWAG and the spaces that we create for our community and each other, because it's important to have soft places to land, because it can be a bit shit out there, eh?
And it's the amazing mahi you're doing with that people, so
Yeah. You. And this is Ria.
Kia ora. So lovely to be here. Oh, I'm still recovering from your piece about Sally. I sat down and I was really feeling horrified because I was late, and I sat down and just eased into that just beautiful flow of language. So I got all in my feelings and cried lots. So lovely to meet you. And new favourite poets. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Ria Hiroki. I am a plus-size model, a writer, performance artist, occasional tarot card reader. I just watched a whole bunch of you go, oh, yay. I didn't bring them. But it is lovely to be here. I am one of 3 parts that make up a small collective called Fat Gal Pals, which is myself, Elyssia, and my partner who's filming me right now. Hey, baby. Amy Lautungo, who is a designer, a plus-size designer for a brand called Infamy Apparel. And last night, Elyssia and I were decked out in full literal sequin ball gowns. And
7 foot tall.
And we were also on a plinth, so we were 7 foot tall. 1 plinth each, there was 4 of us. And I think, I guess, I'm getting in my feelings again. There's something really beautiful about having something like Fat Feb on and something like this on to go and meet new people in spaces that are designed for us. And I know that sounds silly, but I find myself living with depression and anxiety, and I find a lot of mainstream sort of straight spaces quite difficult to navigate, because it's like there's this rule switch and everyone knows the rules but me. And so, you know, I'm standing there trying to take part, but I don't really know how a lot of the time, and it's quite an isolating feeling, just touching on what you were talking about. So last night, standing in a full, 21 meters, she weighed a bit, gown, looking out into this just beautiful sea of queer people and fat people and brown people, and it was just the most beautiful feeling. And it's really lovely to wake up this morning, come to this and carry that feeling through, because it's the same energy in here, just a beautiful feeling. So I'm feeling really good and really encouraged, and everyone had so many awesome things to say that I'm really enthusiastic to hear about what all of you. So that was my speedy introduction. And I will pass, I'll pop this down because we've got our own one. Right, there we go.
Awesome.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Ria. Could you just give our amazing panel another big round of applause? Now, as Chair Sam said, audiences can be pretty reluctant around discussion, so be sure to, write a couple of kind of prompting questions to get things flowing. So I was super strict on myself, and I only came up with 9. But But at risk of dominating the discussion, which I would dearly love to do, because this is pretty much my dream group of people to sit around and talk with, I'm really understanding that my role of chair requires me to engage you as the audience. And so, is there someone sitting out there, despite the forewarnings of audience reticence, who is sitting on a question to kick off our discussion and would like to launch out with it? This might be your chance, considering my own long list. Yes, great. Jackson. Oh, so just a process thing. If you ask your question, I will then repeat it so that everyone can hear and the live stream. So, no, not yet. I will be quiet. Oh, great. Perfect. And just maybe say your name so we know who you are.
Does it? Oh, it works. Yeah, I'm Fran Mano, and I know quite a few of you. And my question to Jackson is, and you don't have to respond, but I'm interested. Before you became fluid, what were you?
So before I learned the terms like non-binary and genderqueer, I just assumed I was male because that's what I'd been told my whole life. And it was actually through reading other queer poets that I kind of learnt about those terms and realized, hey, that's me. So I try to also, I guess, somewhat talk about those things in my own work in the hope that, you know, maybe someone else will read my poems and have the same realization. But yeah, before I learnt those terms, the only options I knew were male and female, and as far as I knew, I was a boy, really, yeah.
In the opening to the session, I asked the question, I echoed the question posed by the essayist, whose name I've forgotten, I won't bore you with it, how the queer body, supporting and supported by other queer bodies, might stand as an antagonistic force to empire. A super chill question for midday on a Saturday. And but I felt excited about the revolutionary potential contained in that question and wanted to refer that back to our panel members. So how might that be? And I would particularly like us, moving forward in the discussion, to think about the queer body in that intersectional sense, because we're never just a queer, we are at the intersection of all the other things that make us indigeneity, fatness, ability, disability, all of those things. So when we're thinking and talking about the empire-destroying force of queer embodiment, I'm asking you that in the intersectional sense of queer bodies. But any of our panellists got a response to that? Don't ask me to clarify the question in scientific terms.
That's okay. No, I think a lot of it, that's a great question. And I think, much of it as a writer has to do with what we are willing to write about and the titles that we use, for instance, the topics that we explore. And I was reminded of this actually on the flight up here. It's been 8 years since I wrote my book, Perv, The Sexual Deviant in All of Us. And on the cover of that book, in the UK version, there's a big arrow with the word perv pointing up to the reader on the front of the cover. Or there's a picture of a lonely sheep in a field. This is before I moved to New Zealand. And I think, why is the penis shaped like that, and those types of things. And I actually was a little bit hesitant to read the book publicly on a plane myself, my own book, and was tempted to remove the cover because it has been a while since I wrote it. And I remember, there are other titles too that I'm proud of. One was Top Scientists Get to the Bottom of Gay Male Sex Role Preferences, those types of things. So, I think, really just being transgressive by nature of the topics, including scientific topics that we're willing to explore objectively and from a humanistic perspective, is part of the process of upending traditional moralistic empire.
That old construct.
Yeah, I mean, just in basic, like, thinking of what empire is, to me, I think patriarchal, heteronormative, and so just by existing, queer bodies are challenging that, and by supporting each other, you know, the larger groups of queer bodies we have, the larger challenge that is to, like, the homogeneity of empire, I think. So things like this festival are a huge challenge to empire, which is fucking awesome.
Yeah, thinking about that, and I've been mulling over this for a little bit around allyship, because I actually just don't really resonate with that idea anymore of being a good ally. I want co-conspirators, you know? Like when I think about my own intersectional practice as an artist and how that is just bucking the norm, I guess, and having these conversations and being hyper-visible in a fat, brown, queer body. I don't think we can afford to just be okay with whatever empire is or whatever that idea is anymore. And I think my takeaway from 2020 is we can't go back to pre-2020. You know what I mean? I'm like, really? Are we just slipping back into these weird old habits of being quite complicit to stuff that doesn't work for anybody? That's. I think that's the thing that I've been investigating a lot and thinking about a lot in my work is what are the alternatives? Because as queer, brown, fat people, there are alternatives that people are moving and shifting and landing in. That, it just gets harder and harder to kind of look at whatever the status quo is and go, really? Why? Who told you? It's not a good idea. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for any of us. So, I think we're slowly chipping away, right? Or like sledgehammering, I think, away.
I just want to total call your co-conspirators, because I don't want allies anymore, I want co-conspirators. You lost me at the Empire bit for a second there, because I'm a hearty Star Wars fan, so I was like...
No offence to Empire.
What kind of event is this? You want me to fight Darth Vader? Are you serious? I'm sorry. But we do it every day. You know, we're that rebel force. It's not just about existing, and that being an act of defiance. Thriving is an act of defiance. Loving each other is an act of defiance. And building those communities that we're safe in, huge act of defiance, until eventually, before they know it, we would have slowly taken over. Oh no, now I sound like Darth Vader. But yeah.
And just, to riff off those provocations that I opened with, one of the things I really noted was that idea of not the queer body in isolation, but the queer body supporting and supported by other queer bodies. And I just really wanted to kind of share my joy for the ways that that's represented in both of your works, in Reclamation and in VASWAG. It's the collective, and it's about the relationship between, not the individual, and I think that's really beautiful, and that's the world we want to be in, but I won't go on. Etta, did you have anything you wanted to add to this empire? And we'll get to your question in a minute. Noted.
Yeah, I do. I want to be really careful as Parker talking about empire at all, really, because I think we need to be really careful as Parker in terms of positioning anything that we do as radical if it is not going to also be supportive of decolonial projects, and also to resist the inherent nature of pakatanga, which is to assume that you ought to be taking vocal frontline leadership positions in a movement. And I had the absolute privilege the other day of being in Parliament, one of the most, like, the symbol of colonial empire in this country, and watching Dr. Elizabeth Kerekere be in her mana, be as mana wahine, be in her takatapuitanga, and karanga to te whānau o te uenuku and mana tipua and our community, and felt like her intersectional kōrero also like held me in my queerness as well. But I also, in terms of my daily life, I suppose I do try for that to be an anti-capitalist kind of living as much as I can while supporting my adequately supporting my disabled body. So I live with two other disabled people. Both the paid support workers that I have on staff at the moment are also queer, and I remember one of my favourite straight white men asked me what he's also disabled, and he said, "Oh, like, you know, why do you, it's hard enough to get good support, and why do you also essentially give yourself the challenge of having to find queer or queer supportive support workers?" And it really came down to me having a conversation with him where I was like, well, I can't be myself if they are not also supportive of that or understanding of that. And I'm in this really nice position at the moment where for the first time, I'm not just being supported in a transactional sense, but I feel like what we're building is disabled people supporting disabled people and disabled queer people supporting each other is like a reciprocity. And I guess without claiming too much space for that, we have this joke in my house that if the Ministry of Health found out about the way that we live together, they would try and make it a model for what disability support was supposed to look like, and then we would all be back in institutional living. And so to try and hold the edge of that, making it ours, making it something that other disabled people and other queer people can find possible, while not letting it be absorbed by systems at the same time.
Beautiful, thank you, Etta. Did anyone on the panel want to respond to any other panellists before? Are we good? We'll hand it. Oh, yeah.
Lightsabers seem pretty fucking queer to me, right?
Like, actually? There's these bits where before they start the fight where they just like, and they're just kind of there for a bit. Yeah. Even as a kid, I was like,
Awesome. We're rapidly running out of time. I have decided to make the executive decision to run for another hour, kind of joking. Sorry, organisers, we're good. All right. No, we'll just run on for a few more minutes. And I will hand it back to the audience. And there was a question in the back row. Do you? Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of empire in a bigger sense, beyond New Zealand in terms of power. And I'm wondering if you're talking about being fluid, and I wonder if empire isn't about binary categories in which we can make one group more powerful and one group less powerful. And I'm wondering how you feel about the notion that perhaps we shouldn't be filling out those boxes anymore, like male and female.
Did everyone catch that question, including our recorder person? Okay, awesome. So I'd love to not repeat that if I didn't need to, but I think we all got the vibe. Any responses, lovely panel people?
Yeah. I kind of wanted to build on the question that Jackson was asked before as well, and just I definitely, yes, smash the binary, is basically the answer to that question. But also just, I think, for me, gender queerness, I think it was Sam, you said, you said to one of my flatmates, when they told you about a change of pronouns, you were like, oh, maybe it is catching. But that, for me, being able to have the space to explore that has been about building community. Of course, we don't know that there are possibilities beyond a binary until, and that can be the case whether you're in quote-unquote accepting space or antagonistic space. You still need to be given the language, and for me, finding the language was not even about words, it was about being around people that lived those examples of what else was possible, and also held some space to be to allow fluidity, to allow when I was, as I still am, exploring gender and sexuality, to not have an expectation of me for that to settle, and to just be we will respond as you wish us to respond, and I've even, and I again feel very lucky that I have friends, even some straight people, who just kind of say, oh yes, okay, we'll just change pronouns, and and wait to see, and not, and just hold that as long as you want us to hold it.
Beautiful, thank you, Etta. Did anyone else want to respond either to Etta or our question? No, all good. Yeah. You hardcore nailed it, Etta. Sam, Julia, we out of time? We're kind of out of time, aren't we? For my other 8 questions that I didn't get to answer. Oh, God. So, in summarising, we've got a few take-home messages. We're going to be dismantling those binaries that contain our possibilities of being. That part of our vision for queer embodiment is creating those soft places for us to exist and to thrive and to be in community when the world out there is not treating us well. And perhaps the third one is that if you are going to read your own book on the plane, think twice about what you assign it as a title. Am I right?
No regrets.
No regrets. Actually, phenomenal titles, though, full respect. Did anyone else have anything else to offer by way of closing that you took from the session, that you, either panellists or audience? Yeah, yes, hello.
Hi.
Oh, sorry, both of you. No. I love that idea. Now I'm going full rogue. So we're going to be closing with one more poem from Jackson, but we'll just ask the person in front of you. What?
I was just really relating to what Ria said about being in spaces and always feeling oh, I don't know the rules, I don't belong here. And then I feel the contrary, we're creating queer spaces, and then I feel you feel out in the hot pool. So either I'm in the normative world and I'm I don't know these rules, I don't feel comfortable, I feel very isolated. And then I enter queer spaces and I'm okay, act cool, this is now this place, and I just would like to acknowledge, because I'm traveling, so I don't have these soft spaces right now, the vulnerability that people bring to these events and open up about their journey, and just really appreciate that, because I do think that it's a very scary place to be, and I do find both worlds scary. So I would just like to thank everybody for sharing their stories and their experiences.
So with the goal of ending on the most beautiful words from Jackson, I'll just again thank our wonderful panel and our wonderful audience for a really lovely hour. I hope that it's given you lots of food for thought, and thank you so much once again. So if we close with a poem from you, Jackson, are you agreeable to that? Because we kind of just told you that's all you're doing. Okay. And then, Elyssia, do you want to do a little promo before everyone goes for your event next weekend?
I'm always keen to plug.
Okay, this is what I was thinking. So, and I know I'm going rogue. Okay. Sam will just start closing in on me eventually. And then we'll be like wrestling the microphone. Okay, so Jackson, Elyssia, and thank you so much. Last word from me.
This is the last poem in the book. I'm not quite sure yet. Sometimes these things take a long time to figure out, especially when you've been told your whole life that you're one thing, and then one day you realize that you're not. It takes a while to come to terms with. You don't trust it at first. You're just going through a phase. You really believed you were that one thing, and maybe you even were for a while, but you're not anymore. It's hard to figure out what you are, especially when you've never had to do it before. At first, it's easier to define what you're not. I'm not a boy, I'm not a man, I'm not a professional basketball player, I'm not a confident public speaker. You could list these all day, but it takes too long to solve by elimination. Sometimes it's easier to start by listing qualities. I'm introverted, I'm empathetic, I'm clumsy, I'm cute. These help you get to know yourself better, but you still yearn for a single word that defines you, so you try a few on. Agender, gender fluid, trans. None of them seem to fit. Some sit more comfortably than others. Genderqueer feels better than non-binary, but in the end, they're all either too tight around the waist or the wrong color altogether. Eventually, you figure out that there isn't a word for what you are because you are the only one of you so far. So you start adapting things that already exist, combining them to create something more specific, something that sticks. I am an angel without wings. I am a devil without horns. I am a gorgon without hair. I am a siren without a voice. I am a maze without walls. I am a cage without bars. I am a question without a mark. I am a triangle with 4 sides. I am a cyclops with 3 eyes. I am a unicorn with 9 horns. I am a leopard with stripes. I am a zebra with spots. I am a mermaid with a cock. I'm Jackson. I am a human being, whatever that means. I am alive.
Holy moly. You are everything. Sorry, I'm supposed to be plugging, sorry.
Where do we buy your book?
Are there copies here, sir?
Oh, so much closer.
All of the books are available at Unity just next door, and you can run down across the road and bring them back, and maybe Jackson can sign, or all of you, anyone who has books here can sign. Etta, we're looking forward to your book coming out. But yeah, Unity, and also tomorrow, if you're not here at our writing workshop or on the online event, the Women's Bookshop will have them at their stall at the Big Gay Out as well.
Yay. Oh, I'm plugging something. That's right. Sorry, I was just thinking about your book. So we opened Fat Feb last night. We have an exhibition in the Vunulangi Roll space in Papatoi called Pussy Fat, which you should go and see. There's a Talanoa this afternoon. Tomorrow there is a live drawing session. And then next week, myself and Ria are presenting a new ceremonial body of work called Only I Can Name Me. So please buy tickets. Thank you.
And I'm absolutely not giving the mic back to George. and officially calling the panel to close. This feels like a conversation that we could have for, weeks and years, and it feels like I was going to say the start, but the middle of something, and an ongoing thing that we all need to grapple with and hear and express and cry through and scream and laugh and all the things. So I really appreciate the kind of breadth that we've covered and the generosity and the lightsaber comments.